I think that I've said the word heartbreak more times this year than at any point in my life, and I've been pissed. I'm angry. I'm sad. It's just it's sickening to me what we continue to see happen in our country, in the world, in the society, and on many levels, it's now reached a level that we just can't. We can't continue on an individual level, a company level, or just in the community level, ignore the impact and the negative impact this is having, not only on people of color or disadvantaged folks, but frankly, just on society as a whole. And there's a lot of things that are going to need to be done, I think, at a government level, policy level. And I'm going to focus today a little bit on what can we do as an organization, and also fill you guys in just a lot of just overarching thoughts that I have. I will say this, that I've seen protests, I've seen movements at different times in my life. And as angry and sad and upset as I am about what's been happening, there's also this sense of encouragement and hope that it feels different this time. And even the fact that large organizations like the NFL and NASCAR are taking first steps to, take it seriously and address it, I think is just a great sign just overall. So energetically, I'm feeling great. And now the question is going to become, what are the issues? What can we do about it? What is the impact that I can have, the impact you can have, the impact we can have together, both externally and internally at the company? I've done my best to put together a constructive framework for my thoughts, ideas, and opinions. And kind of just ending with, there's a lot that we can do and a lot that we're going to need to do overall. I want to start with the formula for change, and some of you've seen or heard me talk about this previously, but I want to talk about it because this is the moment that we're in right now. And the formula that for change in the world is always this. And it's V times P plus Fs, which is greater than R, which equals C. Now I want to start here first, which is that the R part is the resistance. There is a natural resistance embodied in all of us and organizations to not change, because change can be hard, change can be messy, change can be different, change is filled with unknowns. We don't understand. So there's a natural resistance. And the only thing that gets us to overcome that resistance is having a vision multiplied by a sense of pain. Now, somebody could have a big vision in their life. Okay, I want to, be president, or I want to, as a country, go to the moon. We weren't experiencing pain because we weren't going to the moon, but we had a bold and great vision to get ourselves there. The flip side, the inverse, is that there's a lot of pain. This could be a drug addict who finally just felt so much pain, where this person's like, they don't have a big vision, but they're just like, I can't be in this pain anymore. I need to do something different. And then you have to understand, if you've got a vision and you've got a sense of pain, what is the first step you're going to take? And that's always the thing we have to define when we go to change anything in our life. Define the first step. And if the V and the P together collectively are big enough, and you identify the first step, it's got to be at a force that's greater to R, which is resistance. When we get there, we actually equal change. Now, I would say this, the continuation of the police unwarranted brutality, senseless murders, killings for petty offenses and or no offenses, that has created it's not just created, it's actually just continued to amplify a wound that has existed for a long time. And I believe that the pain that we're going through, and what the rioters and the looters have even forced, is creating a sense of, we've got to do something different, because if we don't, the protests are going to get bigger. Okay, the riots are going to get bigger. Movements are going to get bigger. And I really hope that this is that moment in time where we can actually say that we took the necessary steps to make a fundamental, lasting, and different change. How cool is that? What if history looks back at this moment, this time, this movement, and the history books write that we collectively took this moment and it defines our era or defines our generation. And we took a big step to improving the world. And that is really exciting to me just from an overall vision perspective. Engaging in a subject that forces us to confront and challenge our own thoughts, beliefs, prejudices, and judgments, whether they're explicit or implicit, I'd even say conscious or unconscious, with people who aren't like us. And that could involve race, gender, sexual preference, gender identification, religion, disability, and other things. By definition, guys, it's messy, it's uncomfortable, it's scary, and it carries a huge resistance. It's got a big R attached to it. So what I want to do is create a playground and an environment where, as a company, we can feel safe entering into a conversation. And we can remove the fear, but we can also do it in a way that's understanding, that's kind, that recognizes that each person is at their own individual spot and in their own walk and on their own journey. And to be critical of others, to be judgmental of others, regardless of what their beliefs are, is not helpful to their own work and their own movement. And I've seen it and I've heard it, and it's just not helpful to moving us together as a team forward. So the ground rules for this are one, I'd like us to experience joy and appreciation that we're talking about it. Now, you can be critical, you can be judgmental that we didn't talk about it more earlier. I get it. I'm critical. I'm judgmental on all of the same things. Okay. But, you know, it's a sunk cost. It's in the past. All right. Nothing we can do about it. So right now, we're taking the first step and we're taking the big first step internally. Second is this. Don't expect your coworker to be perfect. Each person's in a different place on their own journey. Respect that and appreciate their effort, okay? When someone approaches you or wants to engage with you or have a conversation with you, okay, let's, accept it. Let's understand it. And if they say something a little bit wrong or they're trying, respect the fact that people are trying. The third is this, and it's connected to it, right? Just don't criticize. Withhold your judgments. And there's a phrase we have, right, that hold the facts tightly and hold your stories about the facts lightly. All judgment you have is just your story, and it may be true and it may not be true. The next ground rule is invite and listen to all people's views, even if they don't fit into your narrative, because your narrative isn't right, okay? If someone comes to you with a different point of view, ask yourself, how could this be true? Or is it possible that this could be true also? All right, let's try to release the grip that we have on our righteousness relative to who we are or what we've done or what others done or what our company's done. This is an opportunity to listen and to learn and to connect with each other. The next is to create an open, welcoming, and safe space to engage in our cultural work and improvement, because we have work to do and we have a lot of improvement that we need to make. And inside of that, it's important that we engage and we do so and allow people to express themselves in a safe manner, in a safe environment without judgment or criticism. The next is this, do your own work. I can't express this one enough, that it's not my job to teach the executive team. It's not the executive team to teach their team. It's not, the responsibility doesn't fall on me for each individual to do their own work. It also doesn't fall on our minority friends or LGBTQIA friends or coworkers. It's not their job to spend time with us, teaching us. Now, that's not to say that they're not willing and they're not happy and they're not helpful. And I would believe that they would love to become closer and have a more intimate, relationship with others inside the company. But make sure that you understand that the minority, I guess they are by definition a minority, but in the company they are a minority. There's a lot more white folks than there are minority folks or people of different walks of life and backgrounds. So I just ask everyone to, feel comfortable to reach out, but also do it in a way that's very respectful of their time and their life. because they're not responsible for our personal growth and journey. I would also ask, as we go into improving ourselves or whatever our own work is, that, if we're going to do something, spend the majority of our time reading, watching, listening, and communicating with, Black or minority or LGBTQIA authors, speakers, and experts. I love white folks, but I tell you what, I get a lot more when I talk to my Black friends or other Black mentors that I have in my life. And I'll just end it with this. As we go through it, be kind, patient, and understanding. You're not perfect relative to what you think. I'm far from perfect. We together are not perfect. But together, if we do it, we can be better tomorrow than where we're at today. And that's the goal. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people. I wish I had a magic wand. I wish I could snap my fingers. There is no simple solution to what's going on. Right now, it's about climbing a mountain together, putting one foot in front of the other, and making sure that we improve ourselves every single day relative to diversity, to equity, to inclusion, and there's a lot that's bundled inside of that. Now, some people have heard the word white fragility. You've seen it, read it, heard about it, seen a video on it, whatever. The definition of white fragility is this: that white people live in a social environment that protects and insulates us from race-based stress. Okay? But then, we create an environment that we are protected and insulated from that allows us to live a life pretty much free from any type of race-based stress. Now think about this. Because we're white, we actually don't experience it firsthand, okay? Because we, live in our own communities. We go to predominantly white companies. We, most of us, if we go to church, probably go to predominantly, white churches. And so my point first is we don't experience it. So that's number one. The second is we don't have a lot of close friends who actually experience it. We don't hear stories about it. We create structures and we create barriers, both physical and virtual, which insulate us from having to confront the existence of racism, hear about it, and or be forced to engage with it. The benefit we receive from it is that it allows us to not feel uncomfortable in our own life. There's it's that old phrase, right? If it's out of sight, it's out of mind, okay? If I don't have Black friends or I'm not close to my Black coworkers and I'm not engaging with them on what they're going through in their life, I don't hear about it unless I proactively choose to read about it, study it, or look at the news and it's on. Think about the cocoon that we have created that has created a large level of separation between the white community and people of color. The words I use were it's our way of whitewashing in our life racism and oppression. Because as long as we don't see it or hear about it, to our minds it doesn't exist. And frankly, it's not our problem, and it's not a problem that we actually have to do anything or to deal with it. This is me putting into words white thought and emotion to engaging on racism. And it goes like this. The first is, please know that we are scared and afraid. And it's not because we don't actually care. Because I feel, and I would put Centro as a company high on the index of people who really do care about this. All right, we care deeply. We're just afraid to engage, frankly, because we care. And I'll explain what I mean by that. We don't want to make people uncomfortable, or I'd say more uncomfortable than people already are, by bringing race, sexual orientation, gender identification, or a disability. I put down, we don't want you to feel different than us. Now, this was something that started happening at the end of 2018, coming into 2019. And I've talked about this on the all hands call before. And how I've couched it is it's an appreciation for the minority team members that we have who approached me to have a conversation on diversity. And I was like, God, this is great. Like, thank you. Like, I have had the thought in my head for years about getting all of the minorities or the black team members together in a room, and I want to talk to them. What's the experience you're having? What's it like at this company? But I didn't. One, because of fear, but the thought behind the fear was I want everyone to feel like we're one, and by me identifying someone, a trans employee, someone who, is gay, or someone who's of another color, by definition, me seeking them out is actually creating separation or identifying them as somebody that's different and therefore somebody that we need to talk about. I was wrong. That was a mistake on my part, and I really thank and appreciate those who've helped me and who approached me and got me over that. But I have to believe that a lot of people don't know how to engage. They just don't feel comfortable, or they don't feel equipped with the right skills to do it well. People are afraid to bring up a sensitive subject. Maybe, my Hispanic coworker doesn't want to talk about what happened to them or what's going on in their life. I also can say that people are afraid they're going to say the wrong thing. What if we ask a question and it could be perceived as a microaggression, when in reality, it came from a place of curiosity. So I do believe there is this natural resistance to want to engage because our brain is saying it's just a lot easier and safer not to bring it up or not to talk about it. All right, now I want to move to a topic. It's called, why should I care? Because I think it's a fair question. All right. Why should I care? And specifically, me personally, why should I care? I'm a straight, white, cisgender, affluent, Protestant male. All right. Why should I care? The chips are stacked in my favor. There's no incentive. I mean, right? There's no incentive for me to care about or to change a system that benefits me. And this is resistance. Whether people want to consciously, unconsciously talk about it, explicitly or implicitly create rules or policies that perpetuate this, I think it's an important question that we got to ask ourselves. But I pose the next question is that true? Is it true that what's in place today benefits me? And I submit this, that racism hurts us all. Systemic, compounding, and institutionalized racism via explicit and or implicit laws, policies, biases, and beliefs has a terrible and a devastating impact and effect on our personal lives and our futures. And I want to talk about why I feel this shouldn't be something that a certain subset of our population should care about. And there are 4 points I put down here. Happiness, economic, moral, safety, and protection. And for this piece of the discussion, I would just ask that, just pretend for a second that humans can only act in their own self-interest, that it would be hard to believe that someone would ever do anything that in theory could harm them. So let's talk about what we want. So let me start with the happiness theory. And this is my goal. I believe it's all of our goals, right? My goal is to live a life of joy and happiness that requires, or allows me to be free of my fear of basic needs and safety. It allows me to feel belongingness to others, love and included. It allows me to feel good about myself, my contribution, and my accomplishments in life. And it allows me to feel as though I can achieve my full potential. Now, for those of you who've all gone through Ways of Centro training, you'll notice that I use Maslow's hierarchy of human needs as a metaphor or a framework to talk about the culture that we've been attempting to build since I started this company. And I've been using this really since day one. And remember, at Maslow's, right, at the bottom, it's physiological needs are met, then it's safety and security. And those are just 2 check boxes we should be able to check for every single person, in our country or countries and also the world. But then we really get into the happiness places, right? Do I feel belong? Do I feel loved? Do I feel proud and prestige? Then you get to self-actualization. The bonus thing that I put over here on the bottom left, though, is this. It's that not only can I have those things that I said previously, but the bonus is this, that I can feel good about all of these things without experiencing guilt or shame that I had certain privileges that others didn't have, resulting in the objectification of other groups of people. There's so many things about this, right? And I know, and because I've heard it, I've seen it, I've had my friends say it, that I wasn't privileged. And I think we have a hard time struggling with this idea of privilege. And it's not so much that, in fact, actually, Robert Blackwell, who's going to talk tomorrow, and I highly recommend everybody join that. Robert Blackwell actually doesn't like using the word white privilege. He goes, really what it is you just have a lack of a disadvantage. And the phrase I've been using to illustrate with people is this. I started a company, and those who know my life know I didn't come from wealth. I didn't come from prestige or anything like that. And I know how hard it is to build a company. I know how tall that mountain is. I know the sacrifice and the pain that I've gone through to get Centro to the place where it is. And it's been a tough road, and it's been a big ass mountain. And if I'm being honest, if you added another 100 feet to the top of that mountain because of the color of my skin, I'm not sure, and I'm not convinced that I would be successful, or that Centro would be successful, or that we could have been successful, because I don't have to walk in a room with certain folks, okay, in an industry, by the way, of advertising, which is predominantly white, with predominantly white managers, predominantly white decision makers. I don't have to overcome a belief or judgment about who I am. It's the idea that I want to be happy. Think about what we're doing in this world right now. Think about, what the last 10 years, I mean, think about the time that we spend as in news and politics and society, fighting, bitching, arguing, complaining. It is eternal discomfort. It's eternal fear. It's eternal guilt. It's eternal shame. It's all incredibly unhealthy, mentally taxing. Physically, it's unhealthy. And it's just unproductive. I mean, if we could all have the time back that we spend engaging in things that, we shouldn't need to be engaging in, we would have a much better world, we have a much better communities, much better society. Now, I believe that almost all political conflict can be traced back to racism, prejudice, and oppression. How is the belief that every single person, regardless of race, gender, religion, gender identification, sexual preference, or disability, okay, that deserves equal rights, treatment, and the same opportunities, how is that a contentious statement in our world today? How is that a contentious subject? Yet we see laws, we see policies, we've seen the continuation of failed policies that continue to oppress or restrict or remove rights for another human being. That should not be a contentious statement. That should be the starting point of humanity. And then I moved to, how is it 2020 and we're still fighting this shit? I mean, at some point, it's like, guys, why the heck do we keep having these same discussions? If we fix this, think about all of the things that we could do, and think about the productivity we would just have in our own personal lives. We wouldn't have to be wasting our time doing things that just should be obvious to everyone, that if you're a human being walking on this planet and breathing, you should have the exact same single rights as every other person, and we shouldn't continue policies that oppress people. Racism and the compounding effects which results in generational poverty. This issue costs our country over $1 trillion every single year. And the longer we don't fix it, the longer we don't solve it, the number just gets bigger. Okay? What that equates to, that's equivalent to $6,250 per year in taxes that the average American worker pays because of racism and the corresponding poverty that it engenders. Just to put that in perspective, because these days we throw 100 billion and 700 and $1 trillion around like it's water. We spend $100 billion on education at the federal level in our country. We spend $700 billion in total. So we actually spend over $300 billion more, okay, specifically because of racism and the corresponding effects of it. These are some of the causes of what keeps us in this cycle of insanity where we keep doing the same things over and over. So I'm going to use two examples. The first is racial bias in law enforcement, in the judicial system, and in the prison complex. Let me start first. We spend as a country over $180 billion in incarceration. Now, this is the top-ranked rate of incarceration per 100,000 people on the left. This is just all countries. So it goes, the US is the number one. It's one of the only things in the world we're number one in is incarceration rates, where we've got about 700, 650, 700 people per 100,000 people. Then it goes, El Salvador is next, Rwanda, Russia, Brazil, Australia, Spain, China, Canada, France, Germany, Denmark, Sweden, India. Okay, it's a shocking statistic. And then you look at this other one, it just shows us versus the NATO countries, the founding NATO countries. All right, United States is at 700, the United Kingdom's at 139. What the hell is going on in our country where we're imprisoning this many folks? Here's a timeline of incarceration in our country, going back to the close to $200 billion that we spend. Our population didn't quintuple over the course of 2 decades. This is the rise of the police state, the for-profit prison industrial complex, coinciding with the quote-unquote war on drugs that came into place in the 70s and the early 80s. That is how much we have grown as a country, the people who sit behind bars and in prison or correctional institutions. It just, look, this number doesn't even make any sense to me. Now, if you want to get a little bit shook on a statistic, this one is one that really shakes me. And it answers the question, what is the lifetime likelihood of imprisonment for a US resident born in 2001 based upon the data? And here's what it is. If you're a man, it's 1 in 9, but forget about all men. If you're a white guy, it's 1 in 17. If you're black, it's 1 in 3. Now, sit with that for a second. All right? There is a 1 in 3 chance that you will spend time in jail if you are a black man. And how anyone in the world or on this call cannot understand when people say, I walk around with a subsisting existence of underlying fear in my life of police or of law enforcement or just generally, or a white woman, calling the cops on me because she knows what that means. Okay? This is a staggering and horrible statistic. It's got to get fixed. And then you look at Latino men, so that's 1 in 6. And we look at women, so 1 in 111 for white women, 1 in 18 for black women, and 1 in 45 for Latino women. So if anyone has any problem understanding why people talk about the fear and the impact that they have of police, this is why. So let's talk about that couple $100 billion we're spending. So people are going to jail. We're, arresting a lot of folks. Let's take a look at what we're arresting them for. This is directly from the Bureau of Prisons. All right, racial bias in law enforcement. I'll just go to the red box on the right. 45.9% of everyone in prison today is because of a drug offense. And by the way, these are all mostly petty drug offenses, and the vast majority are marijuana-related offenses. All right? So, 46%. You want to save money on taxes? You want to not pay as much? You want to fix some things? Okay, then let's stop imprisoning people for petty drug offenses. We've first of all legalized marijuana. across the country. You know, let's do rehab. There's a lot of things inside of this, but that is a shocking number. Okay, almost 50% of our entire population is in prison because of a drug offense, not a violent offense, a drug offense. I watched this amazing interview with a Baltimore cop who left the force because of the systemic injustice and racism and targeting. And he called it humble arrest. And the interviewer was like, "What do you mean a humble arrest?" He's like, "Look," he's like, "the cops just come up with stuff to charge kids with just to humble them, you know, for whatever reason." So, you know, I've seen kids with rap sheets a mile long that honestly, first of all, they shouldn't have been in there for 80%, 85% of them. And I'd say 50% of them aren't even real anyways. 5% of arrests in this country are for violent crimes, okay, which would include, you know, sex offense, robbery, weapons, and/or homicide. 80% of these arrests are for low-level petty crimes. You're hearing a lot of discussion that says defund the police. You even talk to cops; they're asked to do too much. Okay, they're not social workers. They have a gun in their holster. Why are they getting called out for stray dogs? Why are they getting called out for, you know, petty, you know, parking tickets? Why? It's just none of this makes any sense to me as a person, as a society. So we've got to be able to fix this if we're going to eliminate one of the chains that are in this movement to keep the cycle going. And then therefore it moves into poverty. You know, if you've got this in out, this unfair targeting, this incarceration rate, it's really hard to keep a job. It's hard to get a job. You're not allowed, you know, in some cases, depending upon what the felony was, to vote. And so that is a big problem that we have. So I just point that out, that this is one of those things that we all should be paying attention to. There are a lot of policies that were passed in the 60s that have adversely affected minority, poor, and Black communities that were passed with good intent, but they actually engendered the wrong outcome, and we need to correct some of these things. This is, actually, I'm going to read this because I liked this sentence. It says, "The war on poverty crippled marriage in low-income communities. As mean-tested benefits were expanded, welfare began to serve as a substitute for a husband in the home, eroding marriage among lower-income Americans. In addition, the welfare system actively penalized low-income couples who did marry because it eliminated or substantially reduced their benefits. As husbands left the home, the need for more welfare to support single mothers increased. The war on poverty created a destructive feedback loop where welfare promoted the decline of marriage, which generated the need for more welfare." Now, here was just simplistically this, which was, you know, it was a very good intended liberal policy to create this safety net in this welfare system. The problem is, and if you ever want to go read history, Patrick Moynihan at the time, who was a Democrat and one of the leading sociologists in Congress at the time, wrote a paper, and he said, "Guys, if we do this and the way that we're doing it, this is what's going to happen." And specifically what the data is showing. We are incenting men to leave the mother. We're incenting moms to kick the man out of the house. Because if a man lived in the house, you got paid less than if the father was there helping raise the family. Now, there's other debates on nuclear families and, you know, a post-nuclear family and what it means. I don't know. I can tell you this. The single parents I know, you know, they have a mountain that's higher to climb than parents who are actually together, helping raise a child, helping care for that child, nurture that child. But if you go back to 1970, okay, and 1960, the unwed birth rates of children, okay, which are single family homes, was less than, right around 20% for non-white citizens. It's ballooned now to 70% of almost all Black children today are living in a single parent home. Think about that. The downstream effect of incenting fathers not to be a father is ridiculous. And then you can see that from a poverty line that if you look at the poverty line, it also shows that families that have children in official poverty that a lot of them have ballooned into single family parent homes. So we've got to address a lot of the systemic laws, policies, things that have been going on. So I'll just end it with this on the economic piece of it. Combined with the incarceration, combined with the lack of the family, think about the lost economic opportunity we have of not educating millions of children that are currently living in poverty today. We are literally wasting millions of brilliant and creative minds by continuing our policies that allow racism, which corresponds to economic suppression existing in our society. Successful countries look to nurture, fill, and harness the potential, creativity, and ingenuity of its citizens' minds. We are choosing not to invest in them. And what's sad is that many consider the US to be the most successful and wealthiest country in the history of mankind. And we are not improving on any societal metric when it comes to education, poverty, economic mobility, and/or advancement, and frankly, diversity just overall. So I just say that when I talk about racism hurting us, it's costing us directly, it's costing us indirectly, and it's really just hurting who we are as a country, not only what we stand for, but frankly, just we've got so much pent up creativity that we're not leveraging. To me, when those are just two examples of what we talk about when we talk about systemic and generational racism and oppression, what that looks like and how that has an impact on every single one of us. So just to cover off quickly on these last couple of things, this whole idea of morality and safety, which was the other two, and I think it's fairly obvious, so I'm not going to spend more than a slide on it, is that from a morality standpoint, I think we all understand innately it's the right thing to do. Okay, we just choose to ignore it in order to pacify our own discomfort, and therefore we can unconsciously demean and objectify others. It allows us not to think about our advantages and releases us from doing any of the work to rectify or improve a situation that, although it's hurting us, we actually don't see it and we don't believe it. So therefore, we kind of just want to pretend it doesn't exist. The next point, though, is this, is that we all start to care when it becomes personal. And this is a thing, and this is one of the pieces of the plank for Centro that I feel we can, in our own little way, we can help. When we don't socialize with others or have close friends or colleagues who look or are different from us, it's really easy for us not to care about them. I'll give you two personal stories in my life. So there was, I had, I had a big family, but I had a certain uncle that I loved. And this was my cool uncle. I mean, the guy was good looking, traveled. This guy would go skiing, he played tennis, and he'd always have cool stories. He lived in big cities. And then one day, he was on his deathbed dying of HIV. And I was torn. Actually, I shouldn't say I was heartbroken because I love my uncle. And it was a moment, and this was in high school, early college for me, was he recovered the first time, they ended up passing away of HIV, that it really shakes whatever you thought you believed. The amount of nights that I cried thinking about the fact that my uncle could not walk down the street or the sidewalk holding the hand of the man he loved to this day breaks my heart. And it allowed me to just, in fact, I actually wrote a paper called The Morality of Homosexuality. It's kind of a senior paper in my sociology class. Really just debunking everything people say of why it's wrong or why it's bad. So that's one story that when I knew someone before my uncle, gay were over there and AIDS was something I knew nothing about. When it becomes personal, we start to care. The second is this. My nephew was born about, a little over 3 years ago with Down syndrome. And that became personal to me because this kid is just a streak of light, a ray of sunshine. I mean, this kid is just pure freaking love. I can't express what an angel this child is. And yet I hear the word retarded, used a lot. And, good news is I had have been sensitive to not using that word before. But all of a sudden you realize that the word, and people are talking about wars on words. All right, well, yeah, you may not like the word, or you may not have a problem with the word retarded. You may not know anybody who's got Down syndrome. But I'll tell you what, for people who have a Down syndrome friend, relative, colleague, or someone who is going through it, it is very hurtful and it's very, very painful to hear that type of a word used. So yes, words matter, and we've got to make sure we're careful about that. And then finally, and I'll connect this to the quote, is that hunger makes a thief of any man. Think about our world. If we didn't have poverty, if we had better schools, if we had reduced incarceration for petty offenses, if we had greater economic opportunity, freedom, mobility, imagine what our society would look. You think we would have the gangs that we have? Do you think we would have the murders, the stealing, the robbing, the protests, the riot? Do you think we'd have any of those things? That people felt equal, people felt free, people felt they had opportunity? The answer is no. Our world would be so much different, okay? Racism hurts every single one of us, whether we're choosing to admit it or not. So I'll end this piece of my discussion with this. Look, this is why I talk about the socialization. Dr. King, we all like to extol and put him up on a pedestal, and he was amazing at what he did. And I could easily make the case that 50 years after his death, we are as segregated as we've ever been. Okay, we live in different neighborhoods. We have segregated schools, public school systems. There is a day where it's fine for me, is what I said before, right? A straight male, cisgender, white, Protestant. But I'll tell you what, that may not last forever, and it may not last for my kids. It may not last for my grandkids if I ever have them. And I've always loved this quote, right? It says, first they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. I believe as a moral statement, okay, as a piece of humanity, it is my duty and responsibility to care for, to help, and to improve the lives of everyone in my community and around me or industry or whatever, because there's going to come a day when I'm going to need their help. And if I'm not willing to become uncomfortable, if I'm not willing to engage, if I'm not willing to proactively change who I am and proactively change the structures that affect people and keep them suppressed or don't allow them the same opportunities that I have, okay? And that day that it's coming for me, I shouldn't expect anything in return. So I just feel it's a fundamental moral obligation and duty. I believe that the lack of diversity at Centro is my greatest failure as a leader. I have done things, I have tried things, I have failed, I have not been successful in creating what was in my mind relative to the type of company Centro would be. And I just want to own that with everybody that's on this call. I also believe that the lack of diversity is our culture's greatest failure. I've said, many of you heard me here say multiple times last year, we're known for having such a good culture. And that's something we should be proud of. That's not something we need to, sully or take away from. But it's a culture that's not diverse, nor is it inclusive to people who are diverse. So we've got to fix that. Now, I am going to go through a few things because I did get a lot of questions on, I don't want to take away that we have done some good things, but the things that we've done via the data haven't been successful. They haven't stuck, and it's definitely not enough, and we can do more. So no particular order. Let me just start with, so everybody is aware of the Giving Tree. So the Giving Tree donated more than $125,000 to organizations last year that aid and support low income and disadvantaged youth. Urban Alliance is something we got involved with, I think 4 years ago. And this was Rahm Emanuel, who was the mayor of Chicago. This was his wife who was running the Chicago chapter, but I think Urban Alliance is based out of DC. And the entire mission of Urban Alliance is to help underprivileged or disadvantaged kids create a future for economic self-sufficiency through a year-long paid internship. And so what they do is, and I think it's 3 days a week, and I believe that's what it has been. They have to get up in the morning. They've got to dress for work. They have to take, transportation to get to the Centro office, and they work at Centro. And these are always senior kids in their senior year of high school. And so we had Kanji, we had Armando, we had Marcel that have already gone through this program with us. It's great. In fact, I just received an email from Marcel a month ago letting me know he finished his first year. He's transitioning into education. So it's great to see, and it's great that he keeps in touch throughout the year. So that's great to see. One Goal. I don't think a lot of people know about what we're doing with One Goal. And let me go back real quick to how we know about One Goal. So I got invited to a charity event for One Goal either 2 years or 3 years ago was my first introduction to it. And One Goal's, by definition, the name is their goal is to create a world where all underserved students earn a college degree and a secondary or a postgraduate education and define their future. We've donated more than 75,000 as a company. I donated over 5,000 last year. I don't remember what I did the year before. But the second year that I was there, I was sitting and I just kept doing the math in my head. I'm thinking, how many public high schools do we have in Chicago? And how many businesses do we have in Chicago? And so then I approached the One Goal board with an idea of a blueprint of a One Goal Centro partnership that we could model. And then if we can pilot it, in which we did last year, and if it works out, I will lead the charge in Chicago to get corporations to sponsor/adopt a high school where we go in, we meet with the students, we get them prepared for college, we bring them into Centro, and we pair them with mentors inside of our organization. So they chose Sen High School, so that was the high school that we worked with last year. There's a lot of work, and I'm very proud of One Goal. I'm also proud of the pilot program that we have going on with them. The next two are actually just more personal because I've gotten a couple questions on, Shawn, what do you do in your life? So I'll mention a couple. Education, just so you know, is my secondary largest passion point outside of Centro. And I believe that if we're going to fundamentally fix this for the long term, the investment in education, and not just education, but really what I would refer to as character-based education, principle-based education, helping children understand the skills and the values that they're going to need to be great post graduation. So CLASS, which is the author, Jeff Peterson, wrote a book called Brain to Brain Teaching, and it happens that my first cousin in Indiana is also part of it. They are helping instill character leadership values in children in public school systems across the country. They do things such as work ethic, healthy problem solving, communication, character, inclusion, relationships, creativity, the importance of cultural diversity. And then a few years ago, I think 5 years ago for the first time, they decided to, or they wanted to do a summer camp leadership program. And so I funded the introduction of that. I've invested more than 80,000 in that. Class has reached now over 10,000 students. We've had over 1,000, I think it might be 1,200 now who've gone through the summer camp leadership. So that's one thing I've done. The second, and this is the other thing, is we're not going to change the system until we fundamentally change the infrastructure of government elected officials and how things work. So many of you probably heard me talk about, but I co-founded 7 years ago an organization. It was initially called the Centrist Project. It's now called Unite America. I've invested $150,000 working on creating structural reform in America. That includes everything from independent redistricting to ending gerrymandering. Okay, we shouldn't pack and crack voters so that, or suppress different voters. We need rational problem-solving elected officials. We want ranked choice voting, automatic voter registration, mail-in balloting, and frankly, getting dark money and lobbyists out of politics. Framework is this. I don't think the words DEI are actually a big enough framework for us. We need to be opening. We have to be an inviting company. We got to be open and inviting, and I start there. But the second thing that needs to define is we have to be cultivating. Okay, it's one thing to be open and inviting and people feel comfortable approaching us and applying for jobs here, but it requires us to be cultivating in the communities and that we serve. All right, that requires work on our end. And then it's got to be equal. And I always say this, right? Nobody wants, in fact, the one thing I always caution against is don't treat anyone like a victim. People aren't asking for your help. They're kind of just asking you to get out of their way. All right. They're not asking for help. They're not asking for a handout. They're just like, just create an equal playing field. Just get out of my way. Let me rise. Let me be who I can be. So if we can create equality, that no matter who you are, what you look like, where you came from, you've got just as great an opportunity based upon your skill and experience level to get hired, and or once you get hired to actually get pay increases and to be promoted. And then finally, it's inclusive. Okay, that not only do you come into our company, you feel a part of our company. You feel like your voice matters. You feel like your mind matters. You feel like you are part of a cohesive team, and there is not a difference between you and the other folks sitting around, or that we actually celebrate our differences would probably be the better way to say it. If we can be open, inviting, cultivating, equal, and inclusive, those things added together will equal and create a healthy diversity inside of our organization. Thank you for the time, especially for those who stayed on. I appreciate it. Sorry it was so long-winded, but it's a big, meaty, very important, critically important topic, very complex, and that's been growing for centuries. We got to do what we can do in our own little corners and neighborhoods of the world. I am committed to my own personal work. I am committed to leading Centro in a very directional and forceful manner to get us to where we need to be. I ask everyone on the team to do the same thing, and collectively, we are going to create a better company, a better culture, and frankly, better communities and a better society. So with that, we got some work to do, but I'm energized and I'm hopeful, and I know that we can lead this industry for what we need to do. So thank you, guys. Have a great day.